participating today. What are we seeing now? Vic and I are going to show a few slides of some things that we saw mostly around our houses and maybe a few local parks. But with everybody kind of maybe spending a little more time at home these days, we wanted to just show a few examples of some things that are common. And you know, quite often in our past slideshows, we showed things that were that we photographed hundreds of miles away. But most of these things are things that I think everybody can see pretty commonly around their house. And we just picked a few examples for today. And we'll start with, this is probably one of the most common things that you might see in your yard, or if you have a feeder, you'll see it at the feeder. What do we have? You might hear it in your yard more than perhaps even see it, but you're going to see them pretty commonly as well. And that's a northern cardinal. They're seed eaters. You can look at the bill and see that it's a heavy bill used for, you know, cracking open seeds. And this is the feeder. We've got 3 different kinds here. Tell a little bit about that, Vic.
Yeah, this was an open feeder up at Tawa State Park in the spring. And of course, birds are very active during migration. And this was no different. But these are all common birds that you're going to see in your backyard right now. So on the left, you have your blue jay. And then in the center of the picture, eating the suet block there, is a red-bellied woodpecker. And on the right-hand side is the Baltimore oriole. And it's kind of interesting because you don't often see all 3 of these guys at a feeding station at one time.
But it illustrates the importance that if you do feed birds, you want to try to put a variety of feed out there. You can see each bird here has their particular preference for what they like to eat.
Got some dead airspace there, but
we have a pair of red-bellied woodpeckers here, and I shot this earlier this spring near my house, and they were actually courting each other, kind of chasing each other around the tree. It was pretty fun to watch.
Now, I have those in my backyard.
I found out that red-bellied woodpeckers really like oranges. In fact, the adult red-bellied woodpecker, which you see on the left here, probably visits oranges that I put out more so than even the orioles do. And here he's taking a piece of orange and feeding it to his baby.
It's a great picture. But mine don't eat the oranges in the backyard.
And so just like people, they're all going to have their individual favorites. This is a pair of hairy woodpeckers. They look like downy, a little larger size, a little larger bill. And this was some suet that I had out earlier. And they were kind of, I don't know if they were kind of courting each other either, but they were kind of crawling around the suet, around the back and around the front. And it was pretty entertaining to watch. Another common bird that you're going to get this time of year, especially if you feed Niger seed, sometimes called thistle seed. It's really called Niger seed, and you can see that through the clear feeder here, you can see the small seeds. Goldfinches, much of their life cycle is actually tied to thistle plant. They'll use the thistle down to line their nests with, and this, of course, is a male goldfinch with a bright yellow spring nuptial plumage and black cap. A nice sound.
A lot of people will notice that the goldfinch activity has tapered off a little bit in the middle of summer. That's because they're probably feeding off of natural foods for a variety in their diet.
And that's true for a lot of birds as they especially during nesting time, they'll kind of switch their diet to more insects and things. This is a black-capped chickadee. They're pretty acrobatic, as you can see in this shot. Here's what they sound like. Okay, they're named after that call, the chickadee. But they also have a call that I like to describe as cheeseburger.
Yeah. when Linda hears this, she thinks it sounds like a squeaky swing on a playground.
A little bit like that too. Now, I didn't know it till this spring that chickadees also like, this is grape jelly, and this one's actually getting a little bit of grape jelly. I mean, they're primarily seed eaters, but you know, they'll relish a treat when they get a chance.
I haven't seen that yet.
This is red-breasted nuthatch. We have two common nuthatches, the white-breasted nuthatch and the red-breasted nuthatch. Red-breasted nuthatch, a little smaller with the eye stripe and the red breast. They don't come down all the, I say come down, they're really a more northerly species, but they wander down this way every so often, usually during the winter months. Here's what they sound like. Very nasal sounding call. Now this picture was, I didn't have any at my feeder this winter. Did you have any at your feeder?
I did. I had some, actually I had a pair of them up until early spring this year, and then they disappeared and I haven't seen them since.
So what I have had in my yard is the next slide, which is, this is a white-breasted nuthatch. We can't see the whole bird, but the parent here is sticking their head out of a nuthatch nest hole that happened to be in a cherry tree in my yard. So the picture that I chose was just to show that they do nest in cavities. And here's what they sound like. And I think they're going to be around at your feeders a little more common than the red-breasted nuthatches.
I have a family of 4 in the backyard. It's been interesting watching the parents feed the young ones.
Now, mourning doves don't really eat oranges, but this one happened to land right near my oranges, and I got a shot of it before it flew away. But they're very common at your feeder. They like to feed on the ground. Usually they only have 2 eggs when they nest. They build these very flimsy nests. Here's what they sound like. Probably everybody's heard this one. We were at a local park. This was actually Sterling State Park. This is earlier this spring, and we happened to spot this great blue heron. I don't have a sound bite of this. They have that prehistoric sound, but this guy was just standing there ready for his photo. You see him on the marshy areas all the time. There's a lake near my house and there's wood duck boxes, and I happened to walk out there one morning and this female wood duck was on top of the wood duck box. I do believe they used it because at several other occasions I saw both the male and female on the box.
Have you seen any of the young ones on the water?
I have not, but one of the mornings I walked out, the female's head was sticking out the hole and the male was on top. I didn't have my camera, of course. That's what usually happens. But so that's why I think it got used. But I think they probably fledged, very early in the morning, maybe before I was out there. But
yeah, I would think by now the young ones would probably be in the water.
Yeah, they probably are. This is a red-breasted merganser female. This is a fish-eating bird. I don't really want to say duck. It looks like a duck, but it's not related to most of the ducks. It's a fish-eating type of duck. I mean, duck type of bird, I should say. But they have a serrated bill, so that when they dive down deep and when they catch a fish, they've got like these little saw teeth along the edge of their bill, and the fish can't get out. Probably most people are going to hear these, or they're going to see them flying over, or they're going to see them in the water with their babies this time of
We're
year.
losing signal here.
Canada geese. Some people say Canadian geese, but the word Canada is a part of the bird's name. So properly speaking, you should call them Canada geese.
Correct.
And one of the early migrants to arrive, especially if you have a marshy area near your house, and you're going to hear them. They'll be early March, they arrive. And this is, of course, red-winged blackbird.
We have a ton of them out back of the OPC down by the bus garage.
This one arrives a little later, but this is a northern catbird. I do have a sound bite for this one. The first thing I think you'll hear on the sound bite is a meow-like call, which I'm sure that's how the bird got its name. But then they have this kind of a call where they have a lot of different sounds.
A very poor mimic.
This is an eastern kingbird. This is in the flycatcher family. We have a group of birds called flycatchers, and they'll perch. You'll see them fly off the branch, maybe get an insect, and then fly back to the branch. One of the field marks of the kingbird is that you see the tail has that kind of a white stripe along the bottom edge. You'll see that.
We have those out back.
Right back of the OPC.
Yep, just to the south.
This was behind my house. We have a whole group of birds called warblers. They're very small. Most of them are about 4 inches in length. So they're smaller than a sparrow. And they're very colorful. And they arrive usually beginning of May. This particular one is called the yellow rump warbler, although we can't see. There's another patch of yellow right above the tail. And so they call it a yellow rump warbler. It used to be called a myrtle warbler. Here's what they sound like. But there's quite a few different types of warblers. And you know, in Eastern North America, and it's probably our favorite thing to watch, because we can get to a place where they're migrating toward a point like Tawas Point State Park or Point Pelee, you know, which we can't get to right now, but you see warblers in very high concentrations. It's a yellow warbler. Here's what they sound like. We had some yellow warblers attempt a nest in shrubs right next to my house. And we, in fact, actually could see the nest out the kitchen window. Here's the nest. This is the bird on the nest. It was in a high shrubs called cranberry viburnum right next to our house. Unfortunately, the nest wasn't successful because we had a kind of a windstorm one night and it kind of blew the nest sideways. I think it was before they had I think it was before the eggs hatched, though. This is a pine warbler. I shot this in a friend's backyard. Happened to land on his feeder. Although I don't think it was looking for seed. Most all the warblers are going to be soft-bodied invertebrates, you know, for their diet. But here's what they sound like. This one was in a tree right next to my deck in May of this year. And this is a black Burnian warbler. Here's what they sound like. And I think the point I'd like to make is that these warblers, if you have to look for them, and they're going to be in trees and shrubs around your house in May. And most people don't know they exist. They're not typically coming to your feeder, so it's easy to miss them. But if you get out and look for these birds during migration, you're likely to see them. They're in your trees and shrubs right around your house.
The ones in my yard, like the oak trees, just before they've budded out, and they seem to go for the little green inchworms that are up there.
It's a chestnut-sided warbler. I think I shot it in the same tree. No, I didn't shoot it in the same tree. I guess a poplar, but again, it was right by my house. So you just get out and look for these birds right around I guess May 10th, May 15th is probably the best time to be looking for these warblers. Most of them pass through and nest further north than here. Although some of them, like the yellow warbler, stay and nest here. And the yellow rump warbler, perhaps. So again, a lot of these birds shot right next to the house or in the backyard, kind of during our stay-at-home order. This is a palm warbler. This one was early, one of their early warblers to come back.
You can pretty much notice it because the tree isn't even leafed out.
Mm-hmm. Now this one was shot again in my backyard this spring, but we have in our past shows put a video clip of these birds in, because one of the ways you can identify this bird is by their tail pumping behavior. They kind of pump their tail. You can see the tail going like my finger if you look at my picture up in the corner, but you'll see the tail pumping, and that's a giveaway that you're looking at a palm warbler if you're looking at a warbler. Of course, the favorite thing to look at, I think, in May, if you're running feeders, are Baltimore Orioles. These are two male Baltimore Orioles. And I put orange halves out. I just put like a finishing nail on the top of a post here and just kind of stick the oranges on there. And what I typically do is get one orange fresh and one orange kind of half beaten, so that I'm kind of alternating oranges. The orange on the left is a blood orange that I got from Kroger's, actually on accident. I thought I was getting regular oranges and got home and there were these blood red oranges, and the birds didn't seem to mind it at all. In fact, maybe they even preferred them.
Well, that's kind of what my oranges look like. I core out the center and I fill them full of grape jelly, and then they get purple looking like that. So maybe that's what they thought. You might have had jelly in there.
It could be. Never get tired of seeing or hearing these birds. They are part of the blackbird family. Not this spring, but spring of 2019, we had at my house, this is a first-year orchard oriole. The adult orchard orioles are of a brick red color, and then the young are this yellow color with the black throat. They have a sound that is reminiscent more of a house finch, if you know what that sounds like. And since I mentioned they sound like a house finch, I'm going to put a slide of a house finch. This is a common bird that probably most of you, if you run feeders, you're going to have this bird at your feeder. And they do they will eat oranges and they'll eat grape jelly. They do have a kind of a sweet tooth. They're primarily a seed-eating bird, but they'll take some of these other types of food as well. Here's what they sound like. A little bit like that sound of the last bird, that orchard oriole. don't you tell them about this one?
Well, this was taken right here in Rochester at Bloomer Park. I was over there riding my bike one day on the trails and noticed a little show going on. We're getting a bit of a delay because I think of the speed of our connection, but it's a male turkey, wild turkey, and he's trying to call in a couple of females here. I think he's got a regular harem in the area. Off to the right were about 3 or 4 more hens. And when they start in on this, they didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to me. They were just kind of doing their thing. So it was kind of fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think we probably need a faster internet connection for this, but you kind of get the gist of it.
Yeah.
But right here in Rochester.
Pretty cool. So another really fun thing to feed in the spring and summer are hummingbirds. About 4 to 1 water to sugar. You make it up 4 cups of water, 1 cup of sugar, or what I do is I make 8 cups of water to 2 cups of sugar. Boil it. If you boil it and let it cool, it'll retard some of the fermentation that can happen and spoilage. This is either a female or a first-year male hummingbird at our feeder. Usually I only fill it up. You see how high I fill it up in the picture. I don't fill all the way up because it takes them a while to drink it. And you want to keep these feeders changed with fresh solution maybe every 3 days or every 3 to 4 days. If the weather's a little bit cooler, you can maybe go 4 days. But they're pretty fun to watch, pretty entertaining. And I mentioned I make 8 cups worth of 8 to 2. I put it in a pitcher or a kind of a big Tupperware container and keep it in the refrigerator. Get several pages out of it. I also wanted to show you here's a male hummingbird, and there's a male hummingbird on the left. Now notice the picture on the left does not show the ruby throat, which males have that ruby colored throat. And what I want to tell you about that is that throat color, the light has to be hitting it just right for you to see that ruby color. Otherwise it will look black. It's not really a pigment, it has to do with the structure of the feather that's reflecting that red color. So the one on the right is the same species, but it's shot in light that you could see that ruby throat. This is an indigo bunting. I haven't had one at my feeder. Have you had one at your feeder?
About 4 years ago, I had one, but I haven't had one recently.
But I have friends that run feeders, and they do come to feeders. This is a male indigo bunting. Sometimes their song is described as starting off with 1 1 2 2 3 3. The females are brown, and so you might say, well, how do you tell a female indigo bunting, let's say from some of the sparrows that we might have? You might notice that the bill, the lower bill is whiter than the upper bill. And that's one of the field marks you look for, because that would be true on the female as well. But I wanted to put this bird right here after the hummingbirds because I mentioned the structure of the feathers had to do with the color. There's no blue pigment in this bird. It has to do with the way the light is reflecting from the feathers. It's actually a phenomenon called constructive interference and destructive interference of light, where some colors cancel out by the way they're reflecting from the feathers. So it's a pretty interesting phenomenon, because if you don't see this bird in just the right light, it will also look kind of a gray-black color.
Pretty awesome.
One of the common native sparrows that we have, this is a song sparrow. Again, that was behind our house earlier this year. And that's just a few examples of some things that we've seen at our houses or near our houses this year. So we can open it up to questions at this point.
How do we do that?
Yeah, I'm looking at, let's see.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. We used to have Morning Dove. I love that sound.
Well,
They were
we're
in the back of our house. I love the sound of their singing.
And I might need some help here getting that chat window back up if so that I can see the questions. Is she around here? Maybe it's here. Oh, okay. I think I got it.
my machine totally went down.
Yeah, well, I've got some questions that we know from earlier.
Correct.
You can find her. I think I need some help with getting their chatted questions available to me. Anyway, question that we had earlier. Should you put less bird seed out in the summer and then more in the winter? It's kind of a personal preference. What I personally do is I stop feeding the larger, like sunflower type seeds in the summertime because they make a little bit more mess on the deck and that. And I feed the Niger feed, which is the smaller seeds, and they tend to be less messy. But I know people that feed all year round. They just keep feeding them. And you can buy no mess seed, which is sunflowers without the hulls. And that way you're not cleaning it up all the time. So, it's just kind of a matter of personal preference as to how much feed you want to put out at different times a year. Of course, summer you're going to be feeding, spring and summer if you want to feed oranges and grape jellies and things like that. Those are only going to be for birds that are like orioles and birds that are coming, migratory species, with the exception of house finches. They'll eat that stuff. But next question we had was, how often should you clean your bird feeder?
Well, as often as they get dirty, which can be pretty often. But you'll notice, especially on some of the tube type feeders, like the Droll Yankees, if you have a lot of seed that is accumulated in the bottom two layers there where the feeding holes are, and the birds are not getting any seed out of there, that's a pretty good indication that you've got some rotted old seed there and things need to be cleaned out. But I would recommend at least 4 times a year, if not more.
You can, quite often you'll see the bottom is kind of a wet, and you can notice.
Gooey mess.
A lot of the feeders they make now are quick release on the bottom so that you can keep them clean.
Yeah, very handy.
Next question I had was, I had many finches at the start of spring, and now I do not. When will they come back? And I mentioned earlier in the slideshow that some birds, particularly when they have young in the nest or when the eggs are starting to hatch, they have to switch to maybe more of a protein diet and find insects and bring those back to the young for feeding. They typically won't bring like maybe seeds back to the nest, but they'll go out and find like insects and soft-bodied things that they could feed to the young. So that's why some birds, like you'll see this with orioles, they'll stop coming to your oranges. And you'll see it with some birds, they'll stop coming to your feeder for a while. And that probably is the biggest reason.
Now, somewhere on the main screen, we should be able to see.
This is a question, this is Gretchen. It's a question about, we have so many red-winged blackbirds and mourning doves and blue jays that we didn't have in the past. Why? We use quality feed, seed, and so we're just wondering why we have so many. I consider them somewhat undesirable birds myself.
Yeah. It might just be a matter that they've discovered your feed and they're around more. I have at my house, I sometimes have a problem with starlings. And when I put the bigger seeds out or even the no mess seed, all of a sudden I'm like besieged with starlings, and I wish I could discourage them. I think that I like the no mess seed, but starlings don't have to work to crack that open. So I think that's kind of adding to the problem. So depending on what you're putting out, but they're pretty adaptive, and blue jays, they're in the same family as crows. They're omnivores. They'll eat just about anything. And if you're putting out something that they like, they'll be around.
Mine like peanuts,
Yeah.
a lot of them.
How to prevent bird bath from getting slimy? The sliminess is probably algae. If your bird bath's in the sun, you're going to get algae pretty quickly. I have a little bird bath on my deck. It's a plug-in one that I keep out all year round. That I plug it in the wintertime so it doesn't freeze. But I have to go out about every other day and dump it and put new water in. And when I dump it, I usually just take like a little paper towel and kind of wipe it around so that the algae, a lot of the algae, can come off the bird bath. It's a plastic tray type of bird bath. Then I dump it, and then I just fill it with new water. So the answer to the question, how do you keep it from getting slimy? It's just really have to I probably change the water often.
I can kind of sympathize with this question because my bird bath originally was just a pebble finish. It was like a cast concrete, and it got dirty very frequently. And so what I did to solve that is I bought one of those glass tray ones, the really pretty ones that'll have pictures of hummingbirds and stuff embedded in the glass. And I just set that on top, and it's much easier to clean, and it doesn't grow algae quite as fast either. So the smooth surface helped. I don't know whether they can hear me through this mask or not, but
Yeah, I decided to put mine on since we're close. Next question I had was, how far do birds typically roam from their nests, and do they stay close? That's going to depend on the species of bird. Your larger birds are going to have larger territories. Eagles, for example, go miles and miles from their nest. They have very large territories. Whereas, maybe a cardinal's, whole territory might be a yard, someone's yard, or maybe a couple of yards.
Or something, yeah.
So then they won't be going that far. As long as they can find food within their territory, they'll stay within their territory. It's just that some birds have much larger territories than others. Is feeding bread bad for birds?
Yes.
I'm generally going to say the answer to that question is yes. That the problem is it's pretty filling, and it doesn't have some key nutrients that birds might need. So if they kind of get used to eating bread, they might be missing some nutrients that maybe seed and some of the other types of feed has a better nutritional value.
We've put it out, but 99% of the time the squirrels get it first. And it's probably just not a good idea because it will attract other rodents. So hold off on the bread.
What are the most common birds we can see in Michigan at this time of year? And it depends on if you're talking desirable species that you'd want, what are the most common ones like that? Or just period, what are the most common ones? Because house sparrows and starlings are two invasive species that are pretty much everywhere, especially if you live near town. Now, if you live more in a rural setting, you might be lucky enough not to have those things kind of overrunning your feeder. But lots of birds are very common. In fact, some birds that are real common aren't really feeder birds. If you get out in the woods, red-eyed vireos, probably one of the most common North American woodland birds, and few people know what it is because they're real small and hard to see, but they're very common. But common feeder birds, house finches, another one that we had the slide earlier, those are very common now. And I'm sorry, but my chat window is closed. If anybody can unmute their mic, if they have some additional questions, we can entertain it now.
Or raise your hand and we'll see if we can click on your picture box there. Otherwise, do we want to go over a couple of these recent articles that we saw in the news about birds and birding?
Sure.
I have an interesting article here from June 10th out of the Oakland Press. It's actually an Associated Press release talking about coronavirus means fewer young whooping cranes for fall release. And the article goes on to talk about the fact that the original flock that was left after the 40s of about 50 birds is now up close to 800. But most of those have been done through programs that use artificial insemination, artificial rearing, and even programs that will escort the birds on a migratory route. Well, because of the COVID situation this year, a lot of those volunteers and a lot of those programs have not been funded, or the people just have not showed up because of concerns about social distancing. So that means that this year we won't be adding a lot more whooping cranes to our recovering populations. And it's interesting because one of the new populations that they're trying to establish is between Florida and Wisconsin, that flyway there. And we are the beneficiary of that because for the last several years, we've had quite a few sightings of whooping cranes here in Michigan. Generally, they're down to the southeast of the state, down around Adrian. But we had a sighting earlier this spring, but during the summer, I've not seen anybody reporting any at this point. So that's just one of the interesting things going on during our little stay-at-home adventure here. Another one that was in here, maybe you can hold this up to the camera and talk a little bit about this, is bird watching. The activity of bird watching has literally soared during COVID-19. It's an activity that people want to do from home and don't have to worry about going out. People are becoming more and more interested in their birds in their backyard or their local parks. And I forget where that article was from, but I think it's from the Audubon Society. And it was another Associated Press release. So that's all good news. We're gaining more and more people to the hobby.
And that's one of the nice things about birding is you can go anywhere, anytime, and look for birds. My chat window did pop back up here, so if you type in a question, I think we'd be able to see it. If there's any other questions.
What do you know about the sandhill crane or the sand crane, whatever it's called?
Sandhill crane.
Yeah, what do you know about it?
We have them.
Yeah, I've seen them out at Kensington Metro Park. I mean, they come right up to you. I've been within 3 feet of one. What can you tell me about them? I don't know much about them.
They used to be uncommon in Michigan, like maybe 25 years ago, and now they're pretty much near neighborhood birds. We have them walking around our neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
You know, in people's backyards, they just walk right up to you almost. So,
well, theirs is a story not unlike the whooping cranes, and that is that they started to develop bigger flyways about 30 some years ago. And as they were mostly birds that migrated from the Texas area up the Mississippi and usually to the west. But in the last 30 years, they've developed a new flyway that comes up the Mississippi and heads towards the east. And so now we're the beneficiary of that. And we get quite a few of them up in the Oakland Township area.
Yeah.
in the fall, they have a festival over near Jackson called Crane Fest. It's in October. It's worth the drive. You can. It's at a Bernard Baker Sanctuary
In Belleville.
And,
Well, no, is it Belleville?
But anyway,
Somewhere.
it's
Bellevue.
everybody just kind of brings a blanket and some picnic things and some chairs and sits on a hillside and watches tens of thousands of sandhill cranes.
Oh, wow.
Fly into this marsh. It's a pretty cool thing.
I think some of you have probably been to our previous presentations where we had some video from Crane Fest, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, they start coming in just before sundown, and it's amazing, the thousands and thousands of birds that congregate there.
Here's a question. Sandhill cranes are protected in Florida. and a huge fine if you interact with them. Do we have that same designation here in Michigan? To my knowledge, we don't have that type of protection. In fact,
Yeah,
there was some legislation that wanted to put them on as species to hunt,
yeah, as a game bird.
as a game bird.
And there were members of the Michigan House that put that through. Fortunately, the Michigan Senate turned it down. This was a topic that came up last year and was in the news quite a bit. You know, a lot of farmers claim that they do damage to their crops and their fields. I really don't see it because the birds generally are feeding on crops that have already happened and dried out. Like if you see the sandhill cranes in the field, they're feeding on old corn that fell out of the combines or the hoppers from last year. They're not feeding on the young tender plants.
Here's a question: do birds reuse their nests or use other birds' nests? They generally won't use other birds' nests, although I'll tell you, I'll just take this moment to tell you about brown-headed cowbirds. Brown-headed cowbirds are what we call social parasites. They lay their eggs in other birds' nests. So the female cowbird will lay an egg, let's say in a yellow warbler nest, typically displacing a yellow warbler egg as she does so, so that the yellow warbler parents don't even recognize the egg as not being their own. And in fact, when they hatch, not even recognizing the young nestling as not her own. And the young cowbirds are typically more aggressive and get more food, you know, from the parent warblers feeding them. So that's, we have that going on, but typically birds will build their own nest. There are some birds that will, you know, build another layer on top of an existing nest.
Well, your larger raptors, you know, eagle nests get used year after year. Many of the hawk nests do also. Herons typically will go back to the same rookery, and they may use the same tree and the same nest, but they will add to it or embellish it for the new season and you know, basically beef it up a little bit.
But a lot of birds might build, you know, onto what they used before too, like another, like,
Correct.
I think, you know, robins have been known to do that, to build another layer on. Yeah.
Do you have any idea, out at Stony Creek Metro Park, there is the Osprey Island? Are you familiar with that? There's not an osprey out there, but there's something else, a crane, something. It's a dark color. It's not a very pretty bird, but it's a tall bird. So that's why I was thinking it was a crane. Do you have any idea what that could be?
Almost sounds like a cormorant.
I think it's probably a cormorant.
A cormor.
From your description, I haven't been out there this spring, but it almost sounds like a cormorant from your description.
I know where she's talking about, and I haven't really taken the binoculars to it, but next time I'm out there, which will probably be in the next day or two, I'll look it up. It's a
Okay.
good question.
I
So
haven't been
cormorant is
able
a-
to figure out what
another-
it is.
It's another fish-eating bird that fishermen don't like too much because they can actually have an impact on the local fish populations.
Oh.
Yeah, especially in the Great Lakes. There's certain sections like up in Grand Traverse Bay and whatnot that they fish it out pretty heavy.
But they kind of sit upright, and they're a taller bird when they're perched, black, because of kind of a long hooked bill. But I say hooked, just kind of a little knob on the end. But let's see. Should you not pick up an egg if it falls out of the nest? I heard that you shouldn't. If you inadequately touch an egg in a nest, will the parents abandon it? I generally think that you can put an egg back, or, you know, if you touch an egg. Birds abandon nests easily toward the beginning of their nest cycle, but they'll stick around and get through it toward the end. So if there's nestling, you know, if there's nestlings in the nest, you know, I've seen them get handled and put back. and the birds, don't abandon the nest. On the other hand, if there's one egg in the nest and they're just starting and you disturb the nest, they might abandon it.
Sure, go ahead, Gretchen.
I think this year we have immature Orioles. So we're guessing that they actually nested in the area. We're pretty thrilled to have them they come and eat the jelly at our feeder, but the Oriole came and then was gone, and now we have, we're assuming they're immature. Is
Yeah,
that
they're
likely?
kind of mottled looking, and
Yeah.
they definitely will come and eat the same food. Once they're out of the nest and flying around, they don't have to have as much insect diet, although they still might eat a lot of that, but they'll come back to the feeders.
Yeah, the timing is right too, because the Orioles arrive pretty early
Mhm.
and they get to work nesting pretty quick. So yeah, it's totally possible.
So
And
we're
if you-
looking for the nest.
Yeah, they build what I call the pendulous nest. It's a hanging basket type of nest. Like the nest will be around some tree branches, and then it'll hang down like a sock, and actually can be maybe this deep, and they're pretty cool. They're pretty cool nests.
They generally nest in some pretty thick trees, so that it's kind of hard to find them. Of course, in the fall, after the leaves fall, you can usually see the old nests hanging in the tree. But yeah, what you want to do is just keep an eye out for the traffic, where they're heading to after they leave the
Yeah.
feeder.
Right.
And that'll be a pretty good indication.
Well, they're wonderful to watch. We love to have the baby birds. We have baby downies, and all the babies are fun.
Yeah, especially the behavior that you see with the parents looking after the babies, especially at feeding time. It's quite a show to watch. It's pretty neat. Same thing with house wrens. Even though they're in the box, you can see the birds bringing huge insects in there hour after hour after hour.
Chipmunks ate all the grape jelly I put out. This is on the chat box. Well, that's the problem. Mammals and squirrels will do that too. The chipmunks are eating all my wife's. They burrow down and eat the roots of the plants, and it can be pretty damaging to a yard. But you could put if you have something like that, some type of cage that has holes big enough for the birds to get through, but not the chipmunks. I've seen people do that where they put their oranges and their grape jelly inside of a cage, and the birds just go through the cage and eat them. But you got to find something with maybe squares that are just the right size. Some people trap the chipmunks and move them elsewhere, but a lot of work because there's a lot of chipmunks.
I just flood them out.
You know what my dad used to do? He used to have the bird feeder on a pole on the top, and he put grease on the pole. So if any animal tried to crawl up, they just slide down.
Yeah. Let's see if we got any other chat questions or live questions.
No more questions?
I think they're all questioned out, but
Here's a new.
What is the best for using binoculars? What is the best field?
The best, I'm not sure I understand the question. The best place or?
Usually they have a certain type of binocular for bird watching.
Yeah,
You
okay.
can see it far, but not as wide.
Yeah. So,
first of all, we could probably do a whole program just on
Okay.
optics for birding.
Just generally.
But it's going to depend on what kind of birding you want to do
Okay.
and where you're going to be going. If you're going to be doing a lot of birding at the seashore,
Okay.
you're going to want binoculars that are a little higher power. In other words, they're not going to be 7x or 8x. You're going to be looking for something like a 10x42 or 10x50 because
Okay.
they're going to have a long reach.
Right.
Around the yard, an ideal binocular is going to be anywhere from an 8x35 to an 8x42.
So let's talk about those numbers for a moment. That
Okay.
binocular power is the first number.
Mhm.
So when you see an 8 by 42, that means it's bringing stuff 8 times closer, more or less. It's a magnification number. Then the second number is the objective lens diameter, and the bigger that number is, the more light is going to be let in for your binocular, but the bigger your binoculars are going to be.
And heavier.
A lot of birders, I'd say the most common size for bird watching is going to be 8 by 42. There's also 2 binocular designs. Your older ones are what they call poro prism, and they're a little bit bulkier, but they're still, nice optics and everything. More recently, most birders are using what they call roof prism binoculars. They're a little more compact. They tend to have a little bit better close focusing ability. And I'd say, your general use birding binocular is going to be something like an 8 by 42 roof prism binocular.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Great show. Appreciated it.
We appreciate all you guys showing up. This is wonderful.
We've got one more chat.
Oh, here's one from Graham.
I purchased dried mealworms for the Orioles, but they are not eating them. Do they need to be live? They are only eating the grape jelly. Well, they do have that sweet tooth. They can probably find enough live ones out there now where maybe they don't need to take those. Now, those dried mealworms might be pretty handy for stuff like bluebirds, maybe in March or some before the natural soft-bodied things emerge. You got anything to add to that?
Well, no, only in the respect that this goes back to a question that we answered earlier. The birds right now in summertime have such a plethora of natural foods available that they're going to be pretty picky about what they want. So at this point, the dried mealworms really aren't going to appeal to them very much.
But they might be very appealing to maybe put them out there in March, see what you get.
Yep.
Or before everything's available to as far as, that type of food.
Do you guys take people out birding?
We've often talked about that.
It, yes, and we've talked to the travel group here about it, but it hasn't happened yet. But we're hoping that we can put something together like that. It would be very fun.
It would be nice to learn from you guys out doing it, since you have the knowledge. It would be.
We would love that opportunity.
We would really enjoy that. We have another friend that we often bird with, and we always thought, hey, maybe we could get a group of 15 and just take 5 each.
Yeah, we could divvy it up so that one, each group of 5 would have their own personal docent, as it were, to take you into the field.
Well, I would be very interested in something like that.
Well, I will pass that on to the travel department. Or maybe they can do it under the aegis of programs here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even just a bus to Stony Creek Metro Park or someplace like that would be.
Yeah,
small
that would be
event.
fun.
I did that with a group and went to Canada. It was beautiful. And I saw a red bunting the first time.
There you go. Did you go to Point Pelee?
Yes,
Yeah, wonderful spot for birding.
beautiful.
Beautiful.
I'd love to be included in your group too.
We'd love to have you.
So, and of course, for the birding to be really good, it's got to be during like a migration. I mean, so you can really see a lot of birds, and we're kind of past the peak spring migration here now for this part of Michigan. But certainly there's going to be some activity in the fall.
Well, coming up at the end of next month, or actually starting the middle of next month, a lot of your shorebirds and things like that will be coming back through. So, if you're near the water, especially the tributaries to the Great Lakes or right along the shore of the Great Lakes, it should be a good show. And it just depends on where you're at. Right now, if you're up at Whitefish Point, you're probably seeing some pretty good stuff up there.
All right.
I think we've pretty much covered
Thank you,
everything.
everybody, for.
Thank you for doing it.
You're great. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks.
Hi. Come up with a program.
Wait, okay, let me talk to them.
Okay.
Okay, don't forget to call me if you want to join in for the women's luncheon on Thursday. I still have time to take some more orders.
So the lunch is a smoked turkey roll-up or a grilled vegetable roll-up with pasta salad and chips and grapes and dessert and iced tea and all kinds of good stuff.
Oh my goodness, sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody have a really fantastic day. And I'm so glad you had such a great presentation to see today.
It was
Enjoy.
wonderful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.